Hello and welcome to the second part of Lesson 10-2. Today we're going to look at graphing inequalities for parabolic functions. So when we're graphing quadratic inequalities, this is going to be very similar to graphing linear inequalities. If you recall, when we have a less than or a greater than symbol, we're going to use that dash line. Same thing, we're going to have a dash parabola. If we have a less than or equal to or a greater than or equal to, then we're going to use a solid line for our graphs. Okay, and then the last thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to pick a test point and remember to shade the solution side of the graph. Okay, so in this case, it might be either inside of the parabola or outside of the parabola. So let's go ahead and take a look at a couple examples. So for example 5, it says to graph the function y is less than or equal to x squared minus 3x minus 4. So right away, because I have a positive x squared, I know I'm going to have a U-shaped graph. I'm going to look for my vertex. So my vertex, I'm going to find the x coordinate by taking the opposite of b and dividing it by 2a. So in this case, it's the opposite of a negative 3 or a positive 3 divided by 2 times 1, which is 2. So my coordinate then is going to be 3/2, and then I'm going to plug that 3/2 in for my y and solve. So I'm going to end up with 3/2 squared minus 3 times 3/2 minus 4. And if I punch all this into my calculator, I end up with a negative 25/4. So I'll put that in here. So this is my vertex. So I'm going to create a table, and I'm going to have my x and my y. My vertex I know is, and actually I'm not going to write this as 3/2. I'm going to write this as a positive 1.5. And this is really a negative 6.25. And I want a number that's less than 1.5, which is going to be 0. And I want that because that's going to give me my y-intercept anyways. And then I'm probably going to pick a number something like 3, and we'll go from there. So when I plug in the number 0 in for x, I end up with a 4. And when I plug in the number 3, I end up with that's a negative 4, and I'm going to end up with a negative 4 as well. So when I go and I plot these, I'm at 0, negative 4, which is right here. I have 1.5, and we're down a negative 6.25, so maybe something like right here. And then if I go over to a positive 3, so 1, 2, 3, I'm also going to be down. So my graph, and again, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to look at my inequality. It is a less than or equal to symbol. Therefore, I'm going to have a solid line. So I'm going to connect these points with a solid line, and I get something that looks like this. And then now for the tricky part, we just have to pick a test point. Again, we can pick the test point 0, 0. So I'm going to say, is 0 really less than or equal to 0 squared minus 3 times 0 minus 4, or I'll say, is 0 really less than or equal to a negative 4? And because it's not, that tells me then that my solution is not inside the parabola, but it's actually going to be outside of my parabola, and I'm going to shade the outside. And we'll do one more example just to make sure we understand how to do this. So our last example for today, we're going to graph y is less than or equal to a negative x squared plus 6x minus 5. Again, I'm going to find that vertex, and I have x is equal to the opposite of b, which in this case is a negative 6, divided by 2 times a, or a negative 1. So this is going to give me a positive 3. And if I plug in 3, I have y equals a negative 3 squared plus 6 times 3 minus 5. And when I simplify all this, I end up with a positive 4. So now, when I look at my vertex, I have the coordinate point 3, 4. and I can plot that out. So this is 4, this is 3, and if I do my table, I have X and Y, and I'm going to put 3 and 4 in my table. I do want to include the point 0 just to see where that is going to hit, and then I might do something like the number, we'll say number 5, just to see where we end up. So when I plug a 0 in, I end up with a -5, and if I plug a 5 in, I end up with a 0. So I'm going to go ahead and plot my points. I have 0, -5. So that puts me right here. I have the point 5, 0, which is going to put me right here. I'm going to look at my inequality. This again tells me I'm going to be solid. So when I go in and I draw my graph in, my graph is going to look something like this. And I'm going to pick a test point. Again, I really like to pick that test point of 0, 0. So I'm going to plug in a 0, and I'm going to say, is 0 less than or equal to a -0 squared plus 6 times 0 minus 5? Or I say, is 0 less than or equal to -5? Well, in this case, it is not. Therefore, because it's not, I have to shade on the inside of my parabola, and my shading then will be in here. Please let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, I will see you guys in class.